morning, UCC. Thank you. See, I love that. I always love the little whistle. I'm like, such a welcoming environment to come out to, especially, I don't know if y'all can tell, but it is hot in here right now. I'm like, ooh, there's lights. It's a little sweaty, so I might start sweating a little bit. It's all good. If you're new here at UCC or to our Saline campus in general, my name is Ashley. I'm the campus pastor here of our Saline location. And our lead pastor, Chris, he goes back and forth between our two campuses. We have one in Saline, one in Wyandotte. And so today, I get the privilege of answering one of these awkward yet hard questions that we asked all of you to text in and to ask us so that we could kind of lay out a sermon series that is literally asking for a friend. But before we dive into that, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of a story, okay? So I've been married a few years, but I've been with my husband for quite some time, right? And there's something that I've learned when it comes to marriage. There are things that you talk about, and there's actually things that you don't talk about. See, I thought when you're married, like you just talk about everything. But apparently, there are some things that you do not discuss. Let me give you an example, okay? So we went on our honeymoon a couple years ago. We went to Mexico. And like, what's the one thing they tell you about Mexico? Don't drink the water, right? Because if you drink the water, if you eat something you shouldn't, you might end up with some issues. We're doing really good. We're on our resort. We're staying on our resort. We're eating these different foods. Like, I'm feeling good, right? And then we go off the resort. And we go somewhere, and we're on this island. It's beautiful. I'm swimming in the ocean. I'm a happy little camper. I'm like a little fish. When I'm in the ocean, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is great. So we go to this island, and it's like 6 hours later. I'm like, babe, I really need something to drink. Like, I just really do it. So we get a drink, and I don't think much of it, right? I drink the drink. I'm good to go. And I go back to the resort, and about 24 hours later, I'm in the bathroom, and I'm like, man, something's not right with my stomach. And like I kind of just lose my appetite from there. Like I'm not really eating anything. And we finish out our honeymoon. I also got sun poisoning, but like I'm going to save that for another sermon because it was kind of ridiculous. But we come back home from Mexico and we're just living our life. And I keep thinking like my stomach's going to eventually balance out, right? Like eventually things are just going to go back to normal. But things don't really go back to normal. No, I keep going to the bathroom and like, all right, y'all gonna learn way too much about me today, but just like go along for the ride with me, okay? So I'm in the bathroom and I'm paying really close attention to what's going on because my stomach is weird. I don't really have an appetite. And I just keep looking behind and I'm like, ooh, what is that? What are those white things right there? What is this happening? And I start, you know what you do? You Google, right? And I'm like, so there's this thing called Google image search. And so I just like take a picture and I just look it up on the Google, and I'm like, oh, that's what that is. I come out, I'm like, babe, I think I have worms. And I start describing it to him, and I'm like, honey, it looks like this. It's kind of weird. There's these white things. I'm like, do you want to see a picture? And he's like, no, don't show me a picture. I'm like, honey, I really need to know. Like, I need to go to the doctor. He's like, no, don't show me a picture. In fact, just stop talking about it. I was like, why? He's like, because I can't look at you the same. We're going to be in the bedroom, and I can't look at you the same if I see that picture. And it made him a little bit uncomfortable, and maybe it's making you a little uncomfortable. You might not ever look at me the same. I'm sorry. It's a little bit too much information. But the reason why I'm talking about it is because when we talk about certain topics or we say a certain word, we have this thing that happens. It's called mental imagery. And so it's like if I say a word, you're going to immediately conjure up a picture in your head. You probably had some pictures just that came into your head as I was telling you that story, right? And so we're going to try this out because I think it's fun, right? So like if I say puppies, you have like this cute little image. I'll tell you my image. I don't know what your image is, but I'm like, oh, they're so cute. They're so fluffy, and they just kind of chew on everything, and they're running around. I'm like, yes, puppies. And then if I say summertime, you just start feeling really good, right? You're like, oh yes, thank goodness, it's Michigan, and the summer's coming. And I start thinking like barbecues. I'm like sea turtles. That's what I equate with summer. I'm like, sea turtles, please, please, Lord, just let me go back with the sea turtles and the manta rays, and I would just be the happiest if you would just convince my husband he belongs in the ocean with me. That's what I think when I think summertime. And if I say dad bod, well, some of us ladies are like, yeah. And some of us are like, yeah. And if I say Donald Trump, some of you just got uncomfortable. And we're not actually going to go there right now. You can picture whatever image in your head that you want to picture right now. Dad bod, Donald Trump, whatever makes sense in your head, all right? It doesn't really matter, because if I say a word, it's going to conjure an image into your head. And those images, they usually give us an emotion, a mental memory, or they might even give us an emotion like happiness or sadness. And the reason why we're going to kind of dive into this today is because I'm a firm believer that there are few words that can cause such an innate image and reaction internally as, in our current society, the church, God, or hell. Like, put it this way, if I think hell, do you want to know what comes to my mind? I think of like a Pilgrim's preacher. Like, I don't even actually know if it's really the Pilgrim's time, but like the guy with the white hair, with the big billowing robe, and he's like, fire, brimstone. He's like, you are all going to hell. And some of us were like, yes, I love that guy. Go get him, get that guy right there. And some of us are like, I really would not ever want to listen to that preacher because I'm a little scared right now. Now, some of us, when we think heaven, I'll just give you my image. Again, my image of heaven. I like see this big blue sky and everything's pretty, and I'm like, it's like the stairway to heaven right there. I'm like, it's like glass and it's gold and it's good feelings all around. I'm like, that is beautiful. And the problem is we take our two images of hell and God, and when we put them together, our brains start to do this little like zzz, zzz, it just starts to fritz a little bit in there. Because when you get those two images in your mind, it would seem that those images would contradict. And when we have an issue with contradiction, we have what's called cognitive dissonance. And we get uncomfortable because we have these two thoughts in our mind that don't seem to kind of go together. And so we sit inside this tension, and the reason why I kind of want to dive into this today is because one of the biggest questions, in fact, I would even argue that one of the most common questions that keep people from Christianity, or that keep people like kind of pushing back against Christianity or the idea of God or the idea of Jesus, is this: why would a good, loving God send people to hell? And it's because of those images that we get a little bit uncomfortable with that question. And I'm kind of excited to dive into this today, because when we think about this topic, what immediately comes to mind is we're like, a good, loving God send people to hell. Like, I got a Carol, right? Do you have a Carol in your life? There's a Carol. She's my neighbor. You got a Carol neighbor, and like she makes the best coffee. She makes the best cookies. She's always like, can I watch your kids for you? Do you need my husband to mow the lawn for you? But you know that Carol isn't actually a Christian. Like, she doesn't actually know God. She doesn't actually know Jesus. But in our minds, we're like, but God, Carol's so fantastic. She makes the best darn chocolate chip cookies ever, and she's always watching my ragamuffins. Why in the world would you be sending someone like Carol to hell when Joe Schmo down the street, he's like living his worst life, okay? He's not living his best life. He's living his worst life. But yet, he says he knows Jesus, and that person is going to go to heaven. We can't reconcile these two images in our mind. And so if you're here today, let's say you're brand new to church. You've never walked into church before. I'm excited for you to be here today because we're going to answer some of these tough questions. But if you have been in church for a while, maybe this is something you've never sat and thought about, or maybe you're like me and you're like, I don't really know the answer and it kind of makes me uncomfortable, so maybe I'm not going to kind of address that when people ask me that question. Well, we're going to kind of dive in today and really go deep. And if you know me, I love a good, deep sermon. So we're going to go fast. There's going to be a lot that we're going to cover today. If you've got your Bible or your Bible app, go ahead and pull it out, because we are going to be starting in Psalm 119:68. So I have a forensics background, which means I competed in speech and debate. That was like my thing. Like, some people have hockey, some people have baseball, some people have, I don't know, what else do people have? Girl Scouts. My kid just signed up for Girl Scouts, but I had speech and debate. When you do speech and debate, you set everything up as an argument. So my first point today is going to be, if we're going to talk about the goodness of God, then we first have to define good. And so Psalm 119:68 says this: you are good, and what you do is good. Point blank. It's regarding God. You are good, and what you do is good. So to define the actual word of good, it says this: having the qualities required for a particular role. So what is the role we're talking about here? It's God.
And so theologians say, like, if we're going to believe that there is a singular God, there's 3 characteristics that God must have. The first is that they must be omniscient, meaning that they are all-knowing. They must be omnipotent, which is all-powerful, and they must have omnibenevolence, which means to be supremely good. So when you think about, like, supremely good, I want you to picture in your mind perfect. Like, so good that there is nothing that is better than this type of good. In fact, we often in our mind, we have these ranking systems. And so I want you to think like good, better, and best. Think about that. I'll give you an example, okay? Steak. How many of y'all like steak? How many of y'all had a bad steak in your life? Okay, how many of you had a great steak in your life? Okay, me too. All right, so when I met my husband, I don't know why so many of my stories talk about my husband. I must like him or something. But anyways, when I met my husband, I didn't like steak that much. You see, when I was growing up, there was 5 of us kids, and then there was 6 of us kids at one point too. And so we didn't get like a good steak. You know what I mean? Like you got like, if my dad was gonna buy steak, it was gonna be that kind that's not like the best cut of meat, right? And my dad, bless his heart. My dad also had this tendency where his philosophy was like no pink. There would be no pink, okay? And so he would bake all of our meat until there was no pink. And so by the time that I left home at 18 years old, I didn't think I liked steak. I didn't think I liked hamburgers. I didn't think I liked pork chops. In fact, I was like, I must just not like meat because my dad kept kicking all of the red out of the meats. And it turns out I really like medium rare meat. That's how it is. And so my dad, I always would say, I'm like, yeah, that was good, Dad. Like that was good. Then I met my husband, and we went over to his dad's house. And his dad, he made this steak. I'm still dreaming about it. I'm actually like drooling a little bit. He made this steak that had like this mushroom sauce on it. I don't know what else was in it, but he would like, it poured over, and the meat was so tender that I was like, oh, I like steak. Yes, I do like steak, and it was so good. And then about a year ago, and my husband knows now, like I like steak, so that was like my better, right? And then my husband made this one steak. I don't know what kind of like, what's that meat called? Ribeye? Ribeye. It's called ribeye. Never had it before. And let me tell you, that steak was the best steak that I ever had in my life. Like you put it in your mouth and it just kind of melted there. And yes, it was pink. And so my whole point of this is like we have these ranking systems in our mind that is like good, better, and best. And so when it comes to our idea of goodness, we have a ranking system in our mind. Like when we're kids, if you were to ask a kid, what does good, to be good mean? They'd usually say, well, it means like follow what your parents say, be kind to people. I'm picturing my kid's voice, be nice, say you're sorry, and then you become a teenager. And if you ask a teenager, well, what does it mean to be good? They might say like get good grades or to be kind to people. And so they start kind of developing more like what it means to be good. And then if you become an adult, we start adding on to that. We're like, if you're gonna be good, like maybe you give to the needy, maybe you care about other people. But even within that, it's weird because we have these ranking systems when it comes to the law. Like it's okay to speed here. Like you can speed a little bit. Like that's okay, but like if you're really being outrageous about it, well now you're just a jerk, so you can't speed that much, right? We have these ranking systems. And as we become an adult, we start assigning characteristics such as like truth or honesty or integrity to our idea of what goodness is. But remember, God is not just good. See, God's goodness is not good. It's not better. It's not best. See, God's goodness is in a category all of its own called holy. And holiness literally means to be pure. It means to be set apart. It means to be distant from. So in our scale of good, better, and best, this is where we all kind of fall somewhere in here. And on top of that, you have God's holiness, meaning he is supremely good. It says this in Revelations 15:4, who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name, for you alone are holy. His holiness is so good that he has to be separated from us, and he has to be set apart from everything else. It also means that within his holiness, though, it is not possible for him to be in the presence of evil. Quite literally, God's holiness is so pure that if he is in the presence of evil or in the presence of sin, it will be cast out. Here's our problem. Our mental image of God usually wants to negate his holiness. Here's what I mean by that. All of us have this image of God in our minds, and it probably looks different person to person to person to person. But usually the image of God that we're very comfortable with, I would label as Papa God. All right, Papa God has the beard. He's got the belly. Papa God's sitting up there, and he's like, think of your favorite grandparent. That's Papa God. He's like, here, I got a piece of juicy fruit. I got some candy for you. Papa God's sitting down, and he's like, he is good, and he is loving, and he is merciful, and he's like, that thing you did, that's not that much of a problem, right? That's our image of God, and if I'm honest with you, it's one of my images of God that I love. On the other hand, however, we have an image of God that I would like to call the judge, and we don't like that image that much. See, that image makes us a little bit more uncomfortable. Like if you think about a judge sitting up in its cubicle and he's looking down and he's delivering a sentence based on your list of right and wrong, we don't kind of want that guy as much. In fact, I don't think I want that guy as much. It kind of makes me want to shy away. I'm like, I don't want fire. I don't want brimstone. I don't want to talk about any of those things. Even further, if you look around culturally, like many of us Christians and non-Christians are quite comfortable with Papa God because we're like, yes, God is love. God is love. You think about that statement, like God is love. Everything he does is love. You just need to love other people. And then when we look at God as the judge, well, there's some cultural pushback on that, where we'll think, well, you can't judge me. I just do what I want. Nobody can judge me. God can't judge me. In fact, and this is my favorite, when people say, well, the Bible says you cannot judge anybody, so don't judge me. In fact, just let me live my own life on my own terms. I don't want some authority figure telling me what I can and I cannot do. But understand, see, God's holiness is so pure that you can't possibly have God be God and God be holy without having his justice at the same time. See, God cannot be good if he is not just. God cannot be righteous if there isn't a standard of righteousness. And here's the thing, God is the standard of righteousness. If you were going to rank anybody up against a ranking system of good, better, and best in terms of goodness, what we would see is that God is actually above. In fact, he sets the standard for what is righteousness. And ultimately, if God's holiness is pure, if goodness requires justice and it requires truth, then hell is God's way of dealing out justice against evil. Lean into this for a second. Matthew 25:41. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Here's what's so interesting. This blew my socks off when I first learned this. See, hell was never actually designed for you, and it wasn't actually designed for me. Hell was designed as God's response for dealing with Satan. And so let's play another game, shall we? I like games. I'm a big fan of them. Okay, image game. Whew, I'm sorry. I'm a little toasty. Are y'all toasty? Are you guys doing okay? See, the hard thing about being in a hot room when it gets toasty out is everybody starts doing the 1, 2, 3 slumber. And I also talk with a cadence in my voice, and that's a problem because if you've ever had a professor who talks with a cadence in their voice, it kind of puts you to sleep as you're going. So stay awake with me, Matt. Stay awake with me, all right? So let's play this game real quick. I want you to just think devil or think Satan. Think that in your mind. What is the mental image that comes to your head when you think devil or Satan? I'll tell you just a couple, if I were to ask some kids what they would think. On one hand, the mental image could be like the little mischievous guy with the pitchfork. You know what I mean? It's like he's kind of in like spandex. He's wearing this unitard, and it's red, and he's got his pitchfork, and he's got a little horns up here, and he's running around. He's like, ha, 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 ha. And then on another hand, another mental image that I have of Satan is like Lord Voldemort, or he who must not be named. And he's this ugly guy, y'all. He's like bald. I don't know why they made him have no nose, I don't know, but when he talks, it's like this hissing, and it's that evil sound. We're like, yeah. I don't want anything to do with the devil because that makes me uncomfortable, but lean into this for 1 second. Biblically, what do we know about the image of Satan? It says this, Ezekiel 28:14. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. Beautiful. Anointed. See, Satan was actually an angel. And so when we take that mental image in our mind, what we can see right here is that naturally you look at Satan, and it's not somebody that you'd be like, yeah, they deserve to be in hell. It's not like Lord Voldemort where you look at him and you're like, you just give me the heebie-jeebies. No, Satan was a beautiful angel who had the grace of God on him at one point in time. But lean into this real quick. Ezekiel 28:17. This is what happened. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. See, Satan's problem was that his image of himself was so prideful, so puffed up. He was so vain that he actually thought that he could do life better than God. The image that he had of himself wasn't this evil being that he'd look in the mirror and be like, yes. No, his original image of God, he was one of the right-hand angels of God. And what went wrong there is that he became so prideful that he thought that he could be a better God than God himself. And so what did he do? He separated himself from God. He said, no, I don't want your authority. No, I don't want your goodness. He said, no, I don't want what you're bringing to me, and so therefore I'm going to separate myself from you. And so what does God do? Well, being the good God he is, he says, I will do exactly that, and I will separate myself from you. And he created a place of hell, because do you know what hell is? Hell in its essence, think about it this way. If you know what pure goodness is, pure love, pure harmony, hell is to know exactly what that is, what that looks like, what that feels like, and then to have to live in complete absence of it. That is what hell is. And God created this place and said, no, you don't have to live here. No, you don't have to be with me. Instead, I will take my presence and I will tear it away from here. And where do we get this from? Do you know? We get it from Jesus. That's what I think is so interesting about Jesus is Jesus actually preached on the topic of hell more than any other topic. And so in one of these instances, Luke 16:22, it says this. Jesus is teaching on the topic of hell, and he gets very, very descriptive. And this is what he says. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man, so you have a beggar and you have a rich man. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was in torments, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in the water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. So yes, we do know that hell does have some fire here. But Abraham replied, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things, but now he is comforted here and you are in agony. And besides all of this, between us and you, a great chasm has been set in place so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. A great chasm has been set in place. That is the separation between God and a complete absence of God. Seemingly, you would know God, you would know his goodness, but you would never be able to be in the presence of God. You'd be completely separated, all because of this idea. well, I can do it better on my own. I don't want to live against somebody else's standards. I don't want somebody else to lay down the law for what I can and what I cannot do. I don't want to be in a position to where somebody else is telling me this is the best way that you should be living. No. I think that I can do it better on my own. In fact, I want to choose what I can eat. I want to choose what I can drink. I want to choose what clothes that I can wear. I want to choose who I can have intimate relations with. I want to choose what laws I follow and what laws I choose not to follow, because I somehow think that my sense of goodness, my sense of morality must be better than God's. And that's where things get a little bit scary. Because when we go by our own sense of morality, when we go by our own standard of good, better, best, I think this is good, I think this is not good, I think I am a good person. Here's a problem. We talk about images. And I believe each of us have this image in our mind of ourselves, right? If I say Ashley, I have this image in my mind of who Ashley is, what she's about, what she looks like. And I might be setting her up against a standard also. Here's what's scary, you guys. My image of myself, your image of yourself, when we are not careful, that image looks a lot more like Satan than it does God. And that's not meant to condemn you, but here's my point in that. The Bible says, for all have sinned and all fall short of the glory of God. So when you have a system of good, better, best, when you have a system of righteousness, what becomes so hard is like, well, I'm a good person. I do good things. And yes, I think you are a good person, but biblically speaking, can you measure up to the standard of righteousness that God himself has set down? Can you be perfect? Can you be so good, so holy that you fall outside of that rating system? I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but think about it for a second. The problem is our own sins. We have this gift of time where the more further removed we are from our past mistakes, the more we can just kind of look back at them and be like, well, that wasn't a big deal. Well, it wasn't really that bad, right? But I gave my money to this person. Well, I helped this person out, right? Romans 3:27, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And if we're honest, even when we think, yeah, I might be an okay or good person, we have broken the standard of righteousness. We minimize our wrongs. We go day to day saying, I'm good enough. And then we have the gall to say, but if God is so good, then how could he send a person to hell? Is that good? How could God send a person to hell? Because he is good. And if you are that good, you can't possibly be good without also being just. You can't possibly be good by saying, yes, it's okay. I can still be in the midst of evil, because he can't. And so we have this confliction with this image of the judge. We have this confliction with the image of Papa God. And we're like, how do I reconcile those two images together? Because I know I have messed up. I know I've had those thoughts in my mind. In fact, I know that there are times in my life where I have stolen. I know there are times in my life where, man, I was kind of rude, like downright mean to that person. I know there was times in my life where I even said I was acting good, but I wasn't really. I was just looking out for my own self-interest. I know that there were times in my life where in the back of my mind I was thinking, I really wish something awful would happen to that person because they just pissed me off.
no matter how hard I try to be good, when I come to that image in my mind before the judge, what am I going to do with that? Because I know my standard of goodness is just not up to par with pure righteousness. And so what do we do with that? Because he is so good, he also gives us grace. And this is what blows my mind. If you have that image of Papa God in your head and you have that image of the judge and you're feeling that little fritz where you're like, what do I do with this? Because I know God loves me. Well, also, I know I might not be good enough. This is what you do is you wipe those two images to the side and you replace them with the image of Jesus. Because God is so good that yes, there is a hell where he says, I will separate myself from you if you choose that you don't want me in your life. You choose to be your own God. But he also says, but I know you can't do it on your own. And so I'm going to give you something that can cross that great chasm. I'm going to step in the place for you. See, our answer, you guys, isn't this image of ourself that says, well, I'll just try harder. I'll just try to be better. I'll just try to do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. No, the image in our mind that crosses that chasm is Jesus stepping in front of us and covering everything that we could have ever done. Literally, he steps in, he says, I will guarantee this relationship for you. I paid the price because I know you just can't do it on your own. Jesus says the only way to the Father is through me because it's only his perfect righteousness, it's only his perfect image that has the capacity to close the chasm and the separation because God is so good and we're just not quite there. And this is what happens next in the story. Why does this matter? So you have that guy that's in hell, right? That guy's like, hey, this is what happens. He's in hell, and he's like, hey, could I have something to drink? And he's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, you didn't choose me. And he's like, okay, well, can I at least go back and, like, warn my family members? Because if they knew, then they wouldn't want to come here. Can I please just go back and tell them? And watch what is said. Abraham replied, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. No, Father Abraham, he said, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. He said to him, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if somebody rises from the dead. Do you see it? I just got some chills, I'm not going to be honest. Ultimately, God doesn't send people to hell. People make the choice, do I want to walk in relationship with God or do I not? Do I want to be under his cross and his will in my time here on earth or do I not? See, God is so good that he's never going to force his presence on you. He gave us free will because he said, I'm going to give you the choice. I don't want to be your puppet master. You can choose me or you can choose not. And ultimately, even after you die, I'm not going to force my presence on you. No. You can choose which option and which way do you want to go. And we make that choice here on earth today to either run to God or to run away from him. We make the choice. We have the choice. We decide. And when we ask or your neighbor asks, well, and like, I don't get into internet wars with people. Like, I just don't do it. But sometimes I want to. I was like, well, if your God is so good, then how could he send people to hell? I just want to be like, because he is so good that he gave us grace in the form of his son. Because I don't know about you, but I'm definitely not perfect. He gave us grace in the form of his son to come step down and cover everything else. And so I just want you to wrap up just by picturing this for a minute, okay? I'm really into this image right now because I really believe that visions we have in our mind They help us to see more clearly what God is trying to do. And so if you will, just close your eyes for 2 brief seconds, all right? No, not even 2, like 1 minute. Close your eyes for 1 minute. And I want you to picture that you just passed, right? You just died. You've died, and we don't know what that process looks like, but suddenly you see yourself at the gates of heaven, whatever that looks like for you. You're at the gates of heaven. And on one hand, you see Papa God sitting there, and you're like, oh, I just want to run towards that. You feel the goodness. You feel the love. You feel like what you've been searching for all your life when you turn to the drugs and you turn to the addiction, or you turn to the alcohol, or you turn to the lying, or you turn to the success, and you found what you're looking for. In that moment, you have pure peace, pure goodness, and you see Papa God sitting there, and then at the same time, you turn to your right, and you see the judge. And you're going to fall face down because you just see yourself for exactly how you are in every mistake. And you're like, how could I possibly be here? How could I measure up? And maybe you're on your knees, and maybe you have a little trembling. Maybe you have a little fear, and you're just sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, holy, holy, holy is the God, Lord Almighty, who is so pure, who is so holy. And you're there, you're just dumbfounded, and you're thinking, I could never. And in that moment where you feel the weight of the condemnation, and you're feeling the shaking, and you're feeling the fear, you look up and you see Jesus step in front of you. And he says, Father, this one is mine. I've paid the price for this one. Their name is written in the book of life. And he just says, come walk with me. Just like that. If God is so good, if he is so good, then not only would he say, I can't be in the presence of evil, but he also sent his one and only Son to die on the cross, to take your place in that seat. And I don't know about you, but I want to submit my life every single day to that kind of God. A God that would say, I've got you. I've covered you. That is grace. That is the goodness of God.